Hello, hello. Welcome, welcome, welcome. How is everyone this evening? Um, yeah, so I guess let's get into it. Um, the thing I was thinking about this evening is, I've been working on a video with regards to dance and wins. I don't know if it'll be out in a few days. Much like George, like I start working on a video that I think is going to be short, and then it starts growing and growing and growing, and then I get delayed on it. So that sort of thing happens. But I've been spending a lot of time thinking about dance and how dance came together and stuff like that. And I came across um, a rather I don't know, interesting. I started looking at early reviews of dance, and keep in mind that like from the industry, like from reviewers, like professional reviewers, they all seem to kind of like dance. But then a lot of the a lot of the fans definitely had a lukewarm reaction to dance to a Dance with Dragons. And one of them that I came across that I want to bring up, I think it's really fascinating because I think really like the criticisms of dance, I think fuel why we want wins so much. That the expectations of wins kind of comes from the things about dance that disappointed us. Um, and I don't know if I'm necessarily disappointed. I'm almost forgetting how I felt when I read A Dance with Dragons. I think I was pretty. I think I was pretty happy with the book when I read it. I don't think I was disappointed. I thought it was great, but there were a lot of really lukewarm reactions. So I have this review here that I wanted to read. This is from someone named John Connington's Return, July 16th, 2011, right? 13 years ago. And so he says, another lurker giving his thoughts. The book fell well short of expectations. The Game of Thrones is my favorite book, not the series, just the book, because it's written so realistically with great characters and vibrant personalities whose actions made sense within the context of those personalities. Eddard dies because of his honor. Robert dies not caring about governing, but hunting for a boar. Sansa lies for Joffrey because she's a naive little girl, etc. The characters are real, with real strengths and flaws. Almost all the major player characters are introduced in the beginning. What with the feast at Winterfell for Robert and on the way to the King's Landing. We got to see all the characters together. Even so, when they diverge, they are bound to their stories by where they came from for common ground. Enough major events happen to keep us hooked. Bran is thrown by Jaime, Catelyn capturing Tyrion at sword point, Eddard being attacked by Jaime, etc. I could go on and on. That's very true about all that's very true about a Game of Thrones. That there are a lot of just plot churning events. King in the North, Tyrion's battle, the kidnapping, the trial. It just keeps going and going. There's just so much in there. And it's not that dance doesn't have like big events, but I think we all kind of know that there's a lot of like. I think filler is a strong word, but I think it's more atmospheric chapters where you're kind of feeling characters' personalities and such. But he's bringing up the differences between dance and Game of Thrones is insanely huge. They're just, it's a different writer at this point. They're so stylistically different. But yeah. But I would actually say that the characterization is probably, George is probably stronger with characters as he goes. I think he probably is better actually later on. So I disagree a little bit where he's like, oh, these are vibrant characters. They're great characters in a Game of Thrones, but I think he's a better writer by the time he gets to Dance with Dragons when it comes to characterization. But let's continue here. All the stories were tied together by a common purpose, Westeros. Eddard and the other points of view were about Lannisters trying to control the realm. Jon Snow was about defending the realm for the others. Daenerys about regaining the realm. Everything was about the realm. The realm is the most important thing that ties everything together. We care about the realm. So I think what he's going to say here is that the stories in Dance are not as Westeros focused because they're on the peripheries, right? You've got the North and you've got Essos, and that the characters aren't so tied together. The stories don't overlap, which I do agree that one of my favorite moments in the entire series, reading for the first time, was Stannis arriving at the Wall and having those two plots cross that were so far apart and then coming together. It was just one of those cream your pants moments where you're like, oh my God, these character from over here and this character from over here, of like those stories have come together. Like, that's so interesting. And even though that happens all over in a Game of Thrones, I actually don't think it's as satisfying in Game of Thrones because the characters barely left each other. They barely left each other before getting back together. It's like, it's like having a reunion show, 3 episodes after the characters diverge. You need time apart before the coming together really like pays off. And so I do think, yes, Dance with Dragons, the characters have diverged. And there is the divergence of like the Asha and Jon and Theon stuff, which is when Mance shows up for Theon and everything. That's an incredible moment, where the stories are converging. When Asha is marching towards Theon, when the Theon story and the Asha stories are coming together, you're like, that's very satisfying. And I think based on this idea of like when plots come together, there's just this, I don't know, magical feeling, right? This magical feeling of oh my gosh, the characters are coming, are finally meeting. Oh my gosh, these plot lines are finally converging. There is some sort of weird, I don't even know how to describe it. I'll because you know how I use the term continuity porn when shows like throw in Easter eggs from earlier stuff. Like How I Met Your Mother is constant with continuity porn, and it doesn't have much to do except for the audience does the member berries thing, and it's like, oh, I really appreciate that. Like, I haven't wasted all this time watching before. It's there. It's coming in. I think it's similar to that, where you're talking about when you have plot lines, where you're like, oh my gosh, it's finally coming together. And so I think what he's saying is there's disappointment in A Dance with Dragons because the threads are still separated for the most part. And what I'm saying is that when we think about wins, we think about those times where the characters are going to come together, like Arianne and Jon Con. Like, all of us sitting there going like, oh my gosh, Arianne and Jon Con, they're coming together and that's going to be awesome. But A Dance with Dragons is still like them thinking about it. And even the sample chapters are like, they're marching, but they're not there, right? So there's a lot of these, like, when the characters meets, we kind of know that like Euron is coming to Old Town. Sam is in Old Town. There's something's happening. Something Victorian is on a battlefield with Tyrion and Barristan. Are they going to meet? Anyway, with the way the series has progressed, I'm sorry, I skipped this one. A Game of Thrones was tightly written. I do not consider a fantasy book, but a book on political intrigue with a gorgeous backstory. Robert's Rebellion is a fantasy setting. I mean, if we ignore the others in the prologue and the resurrected corpses that attack Jeor Mormont and the telepathy body swapping into direwolves. I suppose, I mean, I get the point that there's perhaps more later, but compared to the beginning, but I don't know. There's plenty. There's plenty there. There wasn't overt use of magical powers by mystical creatures. I don't know about that. I don't know. I mean, it's like saying that the Bran story doesn't fucking exist. Like, everything is written in plausible, easy to relate way in the context of political intrigue that could have happened in medieval Europe. Except for the zombies and the others and the telepathic direwolves and the dragons hatching. But yeah, okay. The others and the dragons and the witchcraft of a woman who killed the others and the dragons and the witchcraft of a woman who killed Daenerys were done tastefully. Tastefully is really weird. Tastefully? Tastefully? Didn't she like rip open a horse's neck and have blood splatter all over Drogo, and then and I don't know. The overall story and plot, and I mean, and then you're talking about like killing a child, and anyway, the overall story of and Daenerys burning the woman alive, but it's all tasteful. It's all tasteful. The overall story and plot and characters carried the book, not the fantasy magical parts of it. I can agree with that. That the characters and plot carry the book, not the magical parts. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't dislike fantasy, obviously, but everything has changed with Dance. With the way the series progressed, the fantasy is used way too much. There's so many things to keep track of and so many magic powers and magical artifacts. The Horn of Winter, Euron's Dragon's Hellhorn, the Green Seers, the Werewoods, Warging, Green Dreams, Dragonglass killing the others, weird wizards in Karth and the Undying, Lightbringer and Azor Ahai, burning and seeing things in the fires of R'hllor. Well, first of all, I mean, that's the Horn of Winter doesn't have any powers. Like that's the whole. It was a red herring. The Horn of Winter doesn't have any power at all. Euron's Dragon Hellhorn, we don't know if that actually has any power. The Green Seers, I mean, those are just visions. And the visions are right there in the Game of Thrones. The Werewoods are right there in the Game of Thrones. Warging is definitely in the Game of Thrones. Green Dreams, well, you just use Green Seers. Like, what? Come on. Like, oh my gosh, there's so many things. We've got witches and witchcraft. Like, come on. Dragonglass killing others, okay. But others are in a Game of Thrones. Weird wizards in Karth and the Undying. Okay, fair enough. Lightbringer doesn't really have much power. Azor Ahai is just a legend. Seeing things in fires. Again, visions. Anyway, this is all well and fine, but it completely changes the rules. Basically, in Game of Thrones, we are limited to what men can accomplish. Those were the rules of Game of Thrones. I think he's just really focused on the Eddard story or something. Because, yeah, there's I don't know. It's just kind of just forgetting about Jon and Bran's stories, which are heavily supernatural focused in the first book. Now all those rules are thrown out of whack because they have all these new mechanics. I don't know if the mechanics have changed at all. Maybe one could argue that Melisandre is pretty unique, but everything else is pretty standard. It's just telepathy, and there's Undying, there's undead people rising, and people telepathically controlling animals. That's basically all there is. A lot of these things I've just mentioned, not necessarily used, but I feel like it takes away from character interaction aspects in a Game of Thrones. It would have been better to keep the series somewhat within normal limits of what medieval men could do than to add a bit of fantasy to lean on. The only thing that should have been a trump card the whole time due to the Targaryen precedent is dragons, and they haven't been used yet. Are you talking about in a Game of Thrones? I guess not in a Game of Thrones, but we've got the undead. Anyway, I agree with a lot of this, but like, there's also just like weird points being made. Like there's not magic in a Game of Thrones. The veering towards overt fantasy, that's weird. I don't think there's been a veering towards overt fantasy. And getting away from the core political intrigue, I do not think that the core political intrigue is maybe my personal dislike, which is fine. What is not fine is, however, is that so many people have already brought up is that the entire lack of a coherent plot. Okay. This might be more interesting here. I mentioned before that A Game of Thrones was all about the realm. It gave us a single cohesive thing that we care about. Everything flowed and made sense and came back to the central aspect. There was a sequence of events that we clearly saw. For example, Catelyn goes to King's Landing because she gets the dagger. Littlefinger convinces her it was Tyrion. Catelyn captures Tyrion. In return, Jaime attacks and wounds Eddard. This is shown through several different characters' points of views and flows. Obviously, this is one story arc, but so much happens. In Dance, we have the Myronese story arc. Nothing flows at all. The characters are involved are Connington and company, Tyrion, Dany, Barristan, and Quentyn. Connington and company just separate, abandoning Meereen completely. Tyrion goes on this massive adventure, ultimately doing nothing and making it to Meereen as a dwarf entertainer, jousting slaves. Dany never meets Dany. I realize he picks up Jorah and gains perspective from Penny, but seriously, this shouldn't be taking so long. Does Penny have to serve a purpose? Quentyn goes on his own journey, reaches Meereen, and essentially does nothing. No interesting dialogue between him and Dany or anyone else. Only thing he does is free dragons. Dany's points of view are basically her being too nice, naive, little lustful girl and failing as a ruler. So here I think there's a lot of different points being made that are kind of off here. I do think there are clear event beats that flow in A Dance with Dragons. Like, it's very clear that, you know, she has a city that has unrest, and she needs to marry Hizdar to try to get security in the city, but she doesn't like Hizdar, and she's not sure she really wants to rule Meereen, and she marries him for peace, but then she leaves, meaning the marriage is like falling apart and the city falls apart. Like, I don't think it's like that complicated. Like, it's there's definitely like beats to the Dany story. It's a lot of beats leading to explosion, just like the Jon story is a lot of beats leading to explosion. Like, you've got wildlings going through the wall and collecting dead bodies and a giant and food crisis, and all of these things are leading towards the explosion. But there's definitely a cause and effect flow. But I think he's saying really is that he sees all of these things going somewhere, but there's not proper resolution to it. And he's like, oh, for instance, does Penny serve a purpose? Well, we have to find out in the next book. Like, you know, but if it were a Game of Thrones and the plot's moving faster, you know, you already have those answers. Like, everything is on cliffhanger with Dance with Dragons, which is why I say, like, people are obsessed with wins, because you get to find out all of these things that are set up in Dance. Does Penny serve a purpose? Well, we'll find out in Wins. You know, what's the purpose of Quentin's story? Well, we'll find out in Wins. You know, things like that. Dany, all of them I felt were extremely repetitive or worse. Destroying a great character with vibrant personalities whose actions made sense within the context of those personalities, aspects of the series. How does she turn into a completely wise beyond her years badass with the strength to lead a broken Khalasar who flees unsullied to a super lustful teenage girl? I don't buy the regression. I can understand this criticism of Dany. I don't actually think the problem is Dance. I think the problem is Storm. You know, like, Dany was a clear character in A Game of Thrones, A Clash of Kings, and A Dance with Dragons. That is a consistent character. She is somebody else in Storm. Now you could say, oh, well, she's someone else because she like grows. And you're like, does she? like, where did that come from? Like, because we know exactly who she was in Clash. She was the same character she was in Game. And then she all of a sudden becomes slaughter children and crucify and backstab sellsword companies and crucify wise masters, and then all of a sudden she's back to being Dany again. So I wouldn't. It's not that I would not say that I buy the regression. I don't buy the Storm of Swords move, which I chalk up to dreams. Right? She has weird dreams before it. Yeah. You can say she's just a girl. She's Sansa with a dragon, but that's not true. She was so much stronger and decisive and commanding, and all of a sudden she self-implodes while not moving the plot along whatsoever. I mean, people argue that the plot moves too slowly, but come on. I mean, I would say that Storm is the problem, not Dance on that. But or maybe is the idea that you fuck things up with Storm, you've got to keep going with it. The problem with the events of the story is that the story arcs don't overlap. Okay, here we go. You read one point of view through, and essentially you get their own story. Contrast with the Game of Thrones, each different characters build on each other. Overall, in Dance, there are many things that do not fit and do not tie cohesively. You randomly get Jaime's character with a Brienne cameo, but that's awesome, but nothing happens. You get Areo Hotah, you see a glimpse of Dor Martell, that's awesome, but nothing happens. Tremendous chapters written, but Arya's chapters are the same. Chapters seem like cameos. Let fans read about a character doing a single thing. There's so much happening everywhere and nothing is related. All of a sudden I go to read about Arya and Braavos to Quentin on the way to Meereen. Yeah, I mean, I think that when he's comparing it to Game, the characters never really break up too much in a Game of Thrones. Like they're all in Winterfell together at the beginning for many, many chapters. Then they travel together to King's Landing. Catelyn is like for a second by herself before she's in King's Landing, before she's back with Tyrion. They're never really very far apart. Even Jon at the Wall is constantly getting letters about Bran, about Robb, and so you feel like he's still there. So it's just like you feel like they never leave until, they never have that separation until later, just thematically. You feel that separation once Clash begins, where like Catelyn feels isolated, and you feel that Sansa's in a different world, and things like that. So I don't know, but like I say, I think there's payoff though when you have them apart for a while and they come together. You're like, boom, that's going to be great. Which is again like why people are so obsessed with wins. Like the characters are finally going to meet. Tyrion's finally going to meet Dany. Like Davos is finally going to come into things, and Mel, and everything is going to be great. Jon Con and Arianne, like the Sand Snakes are going to meet Cersei. All these things, You can't start out a series with a focus on the throne in Westeros and then spend such a significant time at Essos, but accomplish absolutely nothing there. I mean, the focus of the book should have been, I mean, if you want to say that the criticism of the book is that it begins with a focus on the others and we never get to the others, that's certainly true. But to say that the focus of the series is on the throne, I don't know. I don't know. Shouldn't it be about the others? And Bran, and anyway. I feel like the series has gotten far away from the tightly woven narrative structure that was so fascinating to read for so many different characters' point of view. Now we have even more different characters' point of views, but they each tell different stories and they're not interwoven and are unfocused. I will say that yes, they are separate, and I do agree that they're unfocused later on. That you don't get the idea or feeling that there is drive to pull them together, with the except like as the example, like when you read Theon Asha and there's that drive of the two stories coming together, the inevitability of those two plots intersecting. It's euphoric to read. And when you look at, say, like Dany, do we get the feeling that Dany is marching towards Westeros? No. Like, do we get the feeling that Tyrion is about to meet Dany? No. Like, the book Saving Grace is the Northern storyline, told mainly through Davos and Theon, with a little bit of Jon. I'm not surprised. All of these, I would say that Asha and Theon would be my statement about the what saves the book. I mean, and the Northern storyline is the Asha and Theon, not the Davos. And Davos disappears pretty early in the book, like, and he has one good chapter, one good chapter. With a little bit of Jon. I'm not surprised all of these there are all these many people's favorite characters. It's because they followed the same formula as a Game of Thrones. Davos is killed by Manderly and instead must go to Skagos. I mean, you could make the Penny argument there. Oh, is Penny going to amount to anything? Is Skagos going to amount to anything? We don't find out what happens to Davos. That's a little inconsistent there. To praise the Davos story, like it's left on a cliffhanger. Ugh. Huge, awesome events that move the plot. Did it? Davos. You find out Davos is alive. He goes to find Manderly. Manderly says, I might join Stannis if you find Rickon. And that's it. Like, weird. The information is crucial to rereading the Theon chapters. Is it? Like, does Manderly play any role in the Theon story? Does he have anything to do with Theon's escape? Like, we think that maybe Manderly is going to play a role in the Winds of Winter with the Battle of Ice. But what does Manderly have to do with Theon? Like, no. He gets stabbed. Distracts people for a second. Since now we know exactly where the Manderly's loyalties lie. Likewise, since now we know, we're introduced to that. Like, we're introduced to Manderly with those loyalties. Likewise, Jon sends Mance to Winterfell, and we meet Abel and his spearwives. The banker from Iron Bank helps Jon, and then is crucial to saving Asha's men. Crucial to saving Asha's men. Asha's men are not very important. I'm sorry. I'm just like imagining somebody reading Dance being like, who's going to save Tris Botley? Thank God Tychonosaurus is here. Thank God the Tris Botley like thread was closed. Thank goodness. And bringing Theon and fake Arya to Stannis. I mean, the banker wasn't really that crucial. Like, Mors Umber's people would have just brought him if the banker hadn't. Anyway, but one thing is one character's point of view comes up again in the others, giving the story arc continuity and logical flow. This does not happen in the other story arcs, which is essentially just filler. We hear a lot. I'm honestly bored reading some of it, and that is something I would never have expected in reading this series. I will, of course, be buying and reading every book with just as much fervor as they come out. I hope, however, that the series goes back to the excellent narrative and pacing it began in a Game of Thrones. No, there's no going back. There's no going back. Rather than the admittedly still good product that we got with Dance. Okay, so I'm sorry for making you guys suffer through all of that. But I think keep in mind, this is a forum post, right? It doesn't necessarily go back and edit it, but I think it's a lot of just criticism and unjust criticism there. But I think overall, the main points that I think are salient are that there's a feeling that the threads are too disparate in Dance and and that there's a lot of filler, and that there's not the same like driving focus of the stories being interwoven, and that when they are interwoven, like he says, like for some reason he says Theon and Davos, but I would say Theon and Asha, like Theon and Asha and Jon, like early Jon, like that's pretty awesome when those when the stories like interconnect, and so I think that's why we're still obsessed with Winds, is that I think that Winds we imagine as the book where the plot lines come together, or begin to come together more, and that there's more drive and more events happening. I think we didn't get the payoff in Dance, and we're expecting the payoff in Winds, and which is why everyone's very obsessed with Winds. It's essentially the incompleteness of Dance that we're obsessed with. Anyway, fun stuff. So yeah, how you guys doing? Let's get into a few super chats. J Lord, the anti-woke pop culture reviewers are right about a few things. We are seeing less of the kind of hyper femininity of the mid 2000s to early 2010s. And then J Lord follows up with, what you still get in Japanese games with, I asked to clarify on what he meant. What did he mean by hyper femininity? What you still get in Japanese games with the likes of Arieth in the forms of Final Fantasy VII. Also in the late 2000s and 2010 period, video games were at the most wild and edgy in a way, and have been toned down roughly post 2016. Though I will mention the 80s after. Do you think Project 2025 will be another Reagan revolution? Oh God, that's a whole bag of worms. So with regards to like, I don't know, my thoughts on, like shifting portrayal of women in games. I think for the most part, and first of all, like femininity, who knows what femininity is? Okay. It's defined very, strangely and weird. I mean, even the character, Ariata, even her character in Final Fantasy, she wears pink. Pink was originally the color for men, and blue was the color for women, and it got switched at some point in like the 1930s. So I mean, like you got to remember that like what we perceive as feminine and what we perceive as masculine changes over time. In the 70s, hairy chests were super in. Now, then men shave chests, and then stubble is, back, things like this. Things change. Like, Playboy magazine would have Playboy magazine would have the women without pubic hair, and Penthouse magazine was like, we're going to put pubic hair in. And everyone was like, oh my gosh, pubic hair. Yeah. And now like pubic hair is not, became not in fashion, or then it comes back. I mean, these trends with regards to like personal appearances and what we think is masculine and feminine, like by itself switches over time. And then of course, what is feminine is different from a male only kind of genre or collection to a female only collection to what is, collectively when two people come together and decide something. I mean, there are multiple ideas on what femininity is. And so it's a bit weird even like thinking about, like I'm sitting here saying like, I don't know what femininity is. Like femininity has changed a lot in my lifetime of what was normal. Like I say, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, when I was young, like women in Europe didn't shave their armpits. Okay. And so like armpit hair, which, you might be like, oh, that's so manly. Like Europeans honestly didn't think about it. The girls just had hair in their armpits. It was not a big deal. And then all of a sudden, like it caught, like the American culture caught on, and it spread over and things like that. Like what is considered like, you know, feminine or not. Like men don't have to shave their armpits, women do. Okay, you know, it was seriously not a thing. So all of this kind of changes, and with especially, and also like from men, from women, the collection, our ideas, those all change. And then from country to country, these things are going to change. Like what we think is masculine in America is going to be very different from what's masculine in Japan or China or things like this, you know, how people behave. I mean, there's all sorts of weird notions. Like when I lived in the Middle East, men would not drink diet soda because they thought diet soda was for women, you know? And so they're like, no, I mean, and so this is one of the big reasons why like Coke Zero was marketed over Diet Coke, is that dieting is a woman thing, even though in the Middle East it was called Coke Light anyway. But the idea is that like Coke Zero feels more manly than Diet Coke, you know? And bonkers kind of stuff, right? Like, but people just have these weird notions. So I don't know if like there's really like noticeable changes. And also keep in mind that like when you're talking about video games for the most part were male dominated, but in recent years, past 20 years, women have been playing more and more. So when you're talking about now taking a video game that is for men or designed for men, and that now saying like, well, let's make it for women too, that's going to change the content, you know? If I'm having a party, think about it this way. Let's say I'm having over guests. I'm having over 10 friends. If I'm having over 10 men, I'm serving different food. We're watching a different movie than if 5 men and 5 women are coming over. Or if 10 women are coming over, I'm serving different food and I'm showing a different movie. All that changes, right? So like if 10 guys are coming over, you know, I might be like, yeah, let's watch Predator. You know, if 10 women are coming over, maybe I'm going to be like, hey, let's watch Notting Hill. It doesn't, I mean, to be stereotypical. If 5 and 5 are coming over, maybe, you know, you're going to pick something else, you know, pick something, I don't know. Remains of the Day. I don't know. Like Last of the Mohicans. I don't know, you know, but the point is that you're going to make different decisions based on your audience. And so like, of course that like video games are going to be different now because more women are playing video games, but also the culture has changed and what we think as being feminine has changed. And a lot of it's just like marketing. Like, what do they think is going to sell? Like, there's a bunch of people in a boardroom going, what's going to sell? What's going to sell the most? What's going to sell the most video games? You know? So, I mean, I don't think it has anything to do with like woke movements or anything like that, or anything that people are talking about. It's people trying to it's just fluctuations, people doing stuff around the world, having different ideas, and people trying to sell shit. It's a lot of people trying to sell shit and, you know, worrying about like what people put forward when they try to sell shit. I just, you know, I don't know. Do I think Project 25 will be another Reagan revolution? Well, I don't know if Reagan really had a revolution. Like, I'm trying, like, what did Reagan pass that had huge changes in America? I mean, he gave amnesty to a lot of undocumenteds. He gave it, like, that changed America quite a bit because you know, like, how did Reagan really change the world? Because he lowered taxes, but then raised them back. Because Reagan had the trickle down Laffer curve kind of idea. There was this Reaganomics idea that if we lower taxes, we'll actually increase government revenue. So we lowered taxes, government revenue plummeted, so he raised them back up again and was like, that's a mistake. Increase Social Security, like raising the cap on Social Security. Like, I don't know if there was anything revolutionary that Reagan did. I don't, not in any sort of bad way. It's just that, like, what revolution happened under Reagan? I don't know. But will Project 2025 be, I mean, even assuming that there was something that Reagan did that revolutionized something in America, which I can't think of what it was. I mean, honestly, I can't think of any revolutions in America, like, unless you go back to the New Deal and like World War II, like Franklin Roosevelt. That's like a revolutionary period in the United States. Post New Deal, like World War II, like changes happened very small and incrementally. Like, I don't know of any revolution that happened. Now for Project 2025, look, it's 10,000 horrible ideas in Project 2025, and many of them are very scary. And so, it's Trump's administration is going to be horrible. It's going to be horrible. But I will say that last time around, he proved to be very incompetent because he's surrounded by a bunch of fucking clowns, and he's a clown. He's a fucking idiot, and they couldn't get anything actually done. The most harmful things that Trump did in his term was putting in super conservative Supreme Court justices, and that is horrible. And he's probably going to replace Thomas and not Scalia, but you know what I'm talking about. The other old conservative guy but Scalia's dead. But he's probably going to replace them with guys that are like 12, and that's going to be horrible because we're going to have. I will never see a liberal Supreme Court in my life. It'll take a generation to fix. That's horrible stuff. And the only other thing Trump really got passed in his presidency was a tax cut. Like, other than that, like, things he did were pretty small. Like, there's very specific Middle East stuff that I thought was horrible, that really was disastrous for the Middle East. But if we're talking purely for America, besides a tax cut for the rich and putting in Supreme Court justices, he failed on every front. And this is just also the nature of government. It's really hard to get stuff passed because we have a divided Congress that's very close. And the margins in Congress are so close that it's likely he's not going to get very much stuff done. Thankfully. I mean, we saw, like, just last week, this near shutdown because they're such buffoons. So it'll be really hard to get anything done. So thankfully, outside of some weird executive orders and some huffing and puffing and probably a tax cut for the rich, I don't think Trump can get anything done. Hopefully. I mean, this is my optimism that, like, that rather than having stage 4 cancer, we've got stage 2 cancer, But yeah. But Preston, don't go on a tangent about the 80s. I mean, we're talking about Reagan. I don't know. But I don't know if there's much revolution to Reagan. Hey, what's going on, man?
Oh, I wanted to real quick. I'm going to say this. I'm going to bounce. I know you're probably moving on from J Lord's thing here,
Sure.
but he's wrong about the anti-woke pop culture reviewers are right about a few things. We're seeing less of the kind of hyper femininity of the mid 2000s, the early 2010s. I don't know what he's talking about, because we've always had that type of character, female characters we have now, even back then. Maybe my man here is too young to remember, but video games, if we're talking about video games
Yeah.
back then, what about Katana from Mortal Kombat? She was pretty kick-ass. Or if we're going 2000s with like the most popular franchises, Halo. Miranda Keyes, Commander Miranda Keyes was
Mhm.
pretty cool.
No, I mean,
Mass Effect, Ashley Williams.
I asked about that. Like, does he mean girl bosses, or does he mean like when he says hyper femininity? Did he mean girl bosses, or did he mean like, Laura Croft, like,
Laura
big
Croft,
boobs
that's a good
and
one.
short skirts, or like what, or what, girly girl, like anime stuff? Like, there's a lot of things that could mean. Um, so I don't know. None of them which an actual woman would probably agree, like would say is feminine. Like
Well, again, because a lot of the grifter guys, they're super right wing, and I'm
yeah,
going to try to be as neutral as possible here in terms of politics. But they are super right wing, and in
yes,
terms of like what they want in regards to femininity, they want Princess Peach always being captured, and
right. I mean, they
that's
want
her
the
whole
sexy
goal.
nun, right? They want a sexy
Yeah,
nun. Like at the same time, like it's that like contradiction, that like they want something that's super sexy, but actually a virgin still, to make
a
me feel like a
virgin
man. To make
who
me feel like a
cooks
man.
who cooks really good foods and comes very easily, so you don't have to waste too much time there.
Oh
Like
right, and
of
who yeah, who only likes like doggy style sex, doesn't
Of
need me
course.
to go down on him. Like
I was actually watching Sopranos, and
by
season
the way,
one,
on
there's
that, isn't it really weird because porn and a lot of guy stuff, like when you're on porn, you see all of the ads for like get a big dick, like get this operation, get this medicine for a big dick, like as if women are sitting there being like, man, all I need is just a massive, enormous dick. Like that's what I want. Like women are just like, please go down on me. Like that's all they fucking want. Like just go down on me. Like I don't even like that. I'm having vaginal sex for you. Okay, just go down on me. Like
that was a storyline in Sopranos season one when Junior he goes down on his girlfriend,
mm,
and the other people around him kind of making fun of him. And I didn't
yeah.
understand. I actually had to look this up. Like, why are they making fun of Junior for doing that?
Oh, it's weird.
Apparently,
It's a famous thing in the it's a famous stereotype as well of the black community, that like black
hmm,
guys are like, no man, I don't go down. In fact, it was a joke in last week's weekend update. He had Michael. You know how they do? Have you ever seen Weekend Update where Colin Jost and Michael Che like
yeah,
do a joke swap?
yeah. Scar Joe was in the background. That was a big
Yeah,
news.
you
Yeah,
saw it, right?
yeah.
Like, Colin Jost actually said, "I don't go down on my woman. That's super gay." Like he actually like used that line because Michael Che was like making fun of the black community, in it. But yeah, no, there and believe it or not, there's a segment of black women who only date white men for that reason. I know it's all fucking horrible and weird, but yes, it's
Well, that was the storyline in Sopranos, and I looked it up why. And apparently, what you said is true. Like if you're willing to down on a woman, I guess you're willing to go down on a man, which to me makes no
oh my
sense.
god, oh my
It
god.
makes no sense to me, but okay, whatever.
I mean, that's the
Um,
equivalent of saying if you're willing to stick your dick in a vagina, you're willing to stick your dick in a butt. Like that, like, but they're two different things. Like if I'm going down on a vagina is different from going down on a dick. Like they're two different things.
and by the way, to because I'll bounce after this, like to what J Lord was saying, which by the way, he changed his name. He was Joel. I don't know if you remember Joel, who
No, no,
always
no.
has
I know,
similar
I know, I
kind of
know.
questions. The show Arcane, which by the way I'm watching right now,
Mm,
phenomenal. Preston, I
yeah,
I would recommend this to you. There are a lot of female characters here, and there's such an incredible range of them expressing themselves in like different ways. It's crazy
yeah.
how like you have the strong girl boss type, but also the feminine type, and then like that, and then the tomboy. Like so many like different female characters that just are
Yeah.
so well done, and just they go
By
into it
by the
very
by the way,
well. Highly
speaking of
recommended.
this, do you remember all the criticism of Dune Prophecy before it came out?
You mean doing Sisterhood before they changed the name?
Right. Like, oh, it's called Sisterhood. It's going to be super woke. It's going to be about all women. And then it's going to be like girl bosses fighting and blah, 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 blah. And then it comes out and it turns out the show's really fucking good and everybody shut up.
They got season 2. Did you see that?
Oh, that's pretty good then, man. It's a really good show. It's a really fucking good show.
Very good show.
Bravo. You know, it was something I did not think was going to be good. Bravo. It's, just because I'm just very cynical about everything HBO these days, but
I think we all are. But
yeah.
it's
But Dune Prophecy was really good, and of course, like everyone shuts up. Like if it's a good show, it's a good show, and all of a sudden, everybody's like they suddenly forget that it's the very definition of their super wokeness thing, right? Like we've got the girl boss, like Empress daughter, like you know, we've got this like sisterhood of women who are super powerful, and man, but anyway.
Well, remember, and I say this about Critical Drinker specifically. He hated the character of Cara Dune, but the moment the actress went all right wing, all of a sudden,
he's like, oh, you know, fighting the man. What a wonderful woman.
It's the thing, and I'm not trying to turn this on you. It's the thing that you jokingly poke fun at me every now and then, because years and years and years ago, I tried to get you to watch this one episode of Rogan's podcast. And this was back before he moved to Texas. And I really liked the episode with him, Joey Diaz, talking about Jose Miguel Battle, the Cuban corporation mafia in New York City. I love that episode. Every now and then you'll pick on me by saying, "Didn't you like Joe Rogan?" In that regard, yeah, but didn't everybody like Game of Thrones until they didn't?
Nah, fair enough. All right. Admittedly, the dude has taken a big, like he went from being random comic who would have on like random people to conspiracy theory nut to hard right winger. Like he made that progression.
Oh yeah, that is correct. But the reason I bring that up is because everything is woke until you find out it's good, and then it's not woke.
Yeah. Right, because then you can pick and choose. I mean, it's the same thing with like looking at the past and saying like, oh, they don't make it like they used to, or things were better in the olden days. You're all taking like little anecdotes here and there. You'll find something that's crap and woke and claim that the reason that it's crap is because it's woke. And then if something's good and woke, you'll not mention that the woke aspect of it, and so that you can continue on. I mean, that's the whole thing about like picking and choosing anecdotes. Is you can always do that. So, you know, this is why we try to do data and trends. This is what scientists do. They collect data. They look for trends, you know. Anyway, but
I'll hit you up later, brother.
Yeah, you know. All right. What if Tywin made a similar decision with Joanna birthing Tyrion as Viserys made with Emmett birthing Balon in the show? What would Tyrion think if Bran Netflix streamed the memory over? Oh. Yeah, I mean, that's a very interesting thing. That like this idea that that some sort of birthing complication is going to happen, and he has to choose. He has to order the death of the mother in order to save the child. Would Tyrion kind of see this as this sort of like loving act of his father? And would it get complicated? I mean, that would be a really interesting thing. It would add much more depth to Tywin than I think George intended. Tywin is written as pretty much a one-note character. He just sucks. He's a fucking dick. He's a horrible dad. He's a horrible person in general. Everything is bad about him. to add like something human in there that like, oh, actually the reason he likes Tyrion is he hates Tyrion is because like he really loved Joanna so much and he sees Tyrion as the person that like kills her and he has all of this guilt. It's like, yeah, that's a lot of complexity and interesting stuff for Tywin. That makes that would make him into a very complicated character. I don't think that was George's intention with Tywin. I think George just fully wants Tywin to be a horrible, horrible human being, like a hypocrite, just dreadful. I mean, this is a guy who planned the Red Wedding and was like, yeah, cool. You know, this is a person who like, you know, cares nothing about Tyrion and only thinks about, you know, his legacy and just does not consider the happiness of his children at all. It doesn't care about the happiness of Jaime or Cersei either. Tywin, and I think this is probably the function of Charles Dance, the actor in Game of Thrones, being so good, is that we think of Tywin being this really important character, but he's mainly a character that exists to be the trauma for Jaime, Cersei, and Tyrion, right? Like granted, like, you know, he does get a lot of page time in Storm, like no doubt, and he gets a big funeral, but his function is to be the trauma for those other characters. They're the characters. They're the heart of the story. And Tywin is just meant to be a horrible, horrible human being. What do you do when you have a horrible parent? Like, how do you handle that trauma? By giving him like reasonable, relatable motivations and having Tyrion realize that his father is this actual human being, this is going against like what George wanted. George wanted like the blunt trauma that there's nothing redeeming about Tywin. So, I mean, I do think it's interesting. And I think that could be a really incredible story. I just don't think it was George's intention. George wanted Tywin to be just fucking horrible. Oh, won't it be strange that the main points of view only have 3 to 5 chapters each? I feel so much must happen off screen. Maybe wrong though. Yeah, no, I mean, I think Admiral, a YouTuber named Admiral Kurd, like made a video about how it doesn't seem to make sense that there just can't be, everything can't fit in the Winds of Winter. Like you need to have shouldn't you have a certain amount of chapters for all of the main character, all the big characters? Isn't it really weird that there wouldn't be? Like, how do you go from A Feast for Crows where Cersei has like, you know, what, 9 chapters? Is it more? How do you go from a book where she has 10? How do you go from a book like Feast for Crows where Cersei has 10 fucking chapters to a book where Cersei has 3, you know, or 5, you know? Like, how do you go from a book where Jon has 13 chapters? Really, Jon has 14 chapters because Melisandre exists. Same with Tyrion. Tyrion has, you know, 11 chapters, but really has 12 because the Lost Lord is Lost Lord was actually a Tyrion chapter. But and the same with Daenerys. Like, Daenerys has chapters, but the Barristan chapters are really Daenerys chapters. I mean, they only exist because of the Daenerys story and stuff like that. So, won't it be strange? Yes. Now, but taking the other side of it, Dany only had 5 chapters in Clash, and Dany only had, I think she only had 7 in Storm. So you could take it from that perspective that well, she didn't really have that many chapters to begin with. Like it's not set in stone. Like we kind of accepted the Arya reduction, and Arya had massive number of chapters, right? In Clash and Storm. Let me see here. I think Jon, I'm trying to think about like somebody like Jon. So Jon has trying to think of the book where he has very few. No, John has a heavy amount of chapters in every book, right? I think the lowest is John having 8. In Clash, John has 9 in Game of Thrones, and John has 12 in Storm, and then he's got 13 plus Mel in Dance. Danny's kind of weird because she goes from being high. She starts with 10, then drops to 5, and then Danny only has 6 in Storm, and then she booms up to 10 plus all the Barristan fucking chapters, So it is weird, but I don't know. I think if one plans those chapters well and makes them work. But this is actually going to be I'm going to get into this in the video I've been working on the what we saw with Dance and Feast and how this leads into Winds and George's writing process and his ruts and why he was in those ruts and what gets him out of the ruts. But will it be strange? Yeah. But how else can you do it, right? You need to cut the chapters down. Like I say, I think like removing John as a point of view helps a lot, but you still have to cut. You gotta scale back Danny and Tyrion. You can't be going on with describing every fucking street in Volantis kind of bullshit. Okay. Oh, even as a non-American, Project 2025 worries me. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly worrisome. But here's the thing about Project 2025 is, like I say, like it turns out the election was really fucking close. Trump won by I think 1.4%, which means the same kind of ratio exists in Congress, which means like. I think the Republicans are going to have what? How many seats? Like 8 more? It's like the lowest number. It's like like again, but it's the equivalent of like a 1.4% like difference in the vote. And not to mention, they've got what 53 senators or whatever. To get things passed, you need 60 senators essentially, and to break the filibuster. And in the House, when you've got that low, that means like some guy's sick, he's out. Like some guy, and Trump poached a bunch of them, so they're not even going to have 8 for a while until they have special elections. So then they're going to get poached, and then just a few people don't like a bill, or a few people are sick, you can't get something passed. So it's just nothing's getting passed. Like it's going to be gridlock, and it only has to be gridlock for two years, and then the Democrats will probably take back Congress, and then really nothing gets done, which is, So yes, it's scary. We should worry. We should resist and fight. It's going to be horrible. I'm not saying it's going to be great, but like I say, not stage 4 cancer, stage 2 cancer. So, any teasers for Mel and the fanfic Shadow Babies? So I am thinking a lot about Mel. I think the next chapter call will be Mel. And I think that what we're going to be dealing with is the war on the wall, that Mel is going to be handling the situation where some force, the Weeper, is going to be coming along the wall, and they're going to be talking about the different stations on the wall, and we're going to be considering the politics of the wall and all of the stations. I think that's going to be more or less the plot. I have to work out things, but for the most part, I think Mel needs to rise to being a leader I know people are like, who's going to be Lord Commander after Jon and stuff like that? Is it going to be Satin and stuff like that? And I think the chapter needs to be about Mel really taking control and everyone choosing to follow her unexpectedly. Like, all these people that are used to following men, leftover Night's Watch people, all these wildlings who survive. I don't, the ones that survive. The Queen's men. Selyse isn't really Selyse isn't really the one to lead because it's Selyse, and Shireen is a little girl, which means the person that's going to lead at the wall is going to be Mel, which I think it's just fitting. One in the sense is that we don't have that many female commanders that we so I think it'd be interesting to have that aspect of the story, but also like unexpectedly we're thinking it's about Jon's story at the wall, and then it's going to be Mel's story at the wall, and it being about her and trying to keep it all together. I think that's going to be an interesting narrative, and so how she handles everything, and how she unites everyone at the wall, and deals with the chaos and deals with the battles and the forts. Because George, introduced all of these different forts, and I feel like they need to be talked about and used. So I'm wrestling with the problem of Eastwatch because there's so much interesting stuff with Eastwatch that I want to get to, but there's no point of view there. And so you either have Mel go to Eastwatch or you have Davos go to Eastwatch. But the Davos story is all screwed up because everyone wants to know what happened on Skagos, but Davos disappears pretty early in Dance, which means Skagos needs to be talked about in retrospect, which is just a weird way to tell like a potentially really long story. So I don't know what to do with Davos. I'll come back to him. I'm gonna be George and procrastinate on him. But I think the next chapter call is definitely going to be Mel and dealing with the wall. Recently did my gazillion reread of Feast Dance. I get the feeling that in the last chapters, George's drive is fading, and it reads like a fading memory. The events are broader and more world-buildy than actual events. Thoughts? I definitely think this is the case. I think it's a procrastination mechanism. This is largely what my video is going to be about. But specifically with keep in mind that the last chapters of Dance were written really fast. So they're very well paced. They're very exciting. But he's going through them quick. So don't think that don't think he's putting the detail that the trudge stuff in the middle that he spends years on. So that stuff, a lot of people are like, oh, nothing's happening, but it's actually really detailed. And then the stuff near the end is super exciting, but it's actually kind of fast. It doesn't have the same detail. But I think it is a lot of setup, and you do feel like you're treading water and that you're not getting anywhere. Like having two Ariane chapters to even the sample chapters, having two Ariane chapters just to get to John Connington. I'll just put it off. And this is something George does, is that when he doesn't know what to do, he just starts writing, which is why you have food descriptions and introduction of new lore. If you can't figure out what to do with a character, well, I'll just start describing a different character over here. Oh yeah, well, what's Tom going to do next? Well, I don't know what Tom's going to do next, but that's Larry. Larry comes from a small town in rural Kansas. There were cornfields around his house, and he used to go out and eat that sweet corn, and he loved it. And he used to bring ears home to his mother, and his mother would sit by his bed, and they would drink lemonade on Sunday mornings. That was a tradition in their house, and you could just be like, okay, but what happened to Tom? What are we fucking doing, right? Yeah, you get that feeling. I'm just gonna fucking invent stuff. it's why he also like likes new points of view. Because one, it's like he can't figure out what to do. But if I invent a new point of view, then all of a sudden that point of view gets to talk about backstory. All of a sudden I'm learning about, Barristan at Harrenhal and John Con at Stony Sept and stuff like that. Like you can't do that if it's Dany. It's not all of a sudden Dany's like, I'm going to tell you about this time me and Viserys. He just doesn't do that. But it's a new point of view. You get to write all sorts of random lore building stuff. So I do think there's a lot of treading water, and it's a procrastination technique, in hopes that something's gonna like bust out. But it's one of the reasons why like Dance and Feast are so huge, is that he's like, I don't know what to do. I'll just have Jon go on a ranging north of the wall where he finds some wildlings and a giant and some corpses, and then talks about what a beautiful night it is. Or I'm going to have Tyrion walk around Volantis and talk about all the different bridges and the different factions and how there's, a triarchy and tigers and elephants, and that statue over there was missing a head, and like, so yeah, I read it just because I've been dealing with a lot of like studying the history of which chapters George wrote and which order and what ruts he was in, and it's really quite amazing and illuminating on like when you understand like George's life outside and like what was going on with the same characters. Like, oh, this chapter was written in his stalling period. Oh, okay. This chapter was written, in his booming period and stuff like that. I saw a theory on Reddit that the execution of Garrett and Bran 1 in Game of Thrones foreshadows King Bran having to choose whether to execute Jon for desertion at the end of the story. Do you agree? I mean, maybe. I mean, I think the big thing is that it foreshadows Ned's execution at the end of the Game of Thrones. That, he's unjustly executing someone and then is beheading someone, and someone else unjustly executes him. I think that is a big foreshadow. But could it be for Bran thinking about like Jon and his desertion at the end? Yeah, I mean, that'd be, sure, maybe. I mean, hard to prove one way or the other, or to think about that kind of information. It doesn't seem like something that there would be any like that Bran would be like thinking about. Like Bran would just be like, no, I'm not going to execute Jon. Like, why would I do that? Like, we've never established Bran as this like law obsessed order kind of guy, right? So it's something that doesn't necessarily fit, I think. Plus if like Bran's king, he can do whatever he wants, right? Rob, was going to take Jon off the wall and all sorts of stuff. So I don't know. Now that I think about it, it doesn't seem to fit, because like Bran is not established as a character who would execute people for desertion. Even Arya's choosing to execute people for desertion with Darion is a bit weird and crazy. Like, why does she care? It's just that she didn't like the guy, and she was coming up with a reason, I think. It's not that she's sitting there being like, oh, he's Night's Watch, and the Night's Watch and their vows. She wasn't thinking about that. She was just like, Darion's a jerk. I want to kill him. Like that was it. And that was the excuse she found. But Brent's never had that kind of, those thoughts. He's never been honor and order obsessed, so I don't know. Could be, but we're never ever getting a Doom of Spring. Come on. A friend of mine said it's hard for her to read due to graphic essay scenes and underage characters being abused. Dany, why make Dany 14 yet give her quote unquote consensual relationship with Drogo? Yeah, and he aged her up a year. She was 13 in the original draft. Um, the hmm. I mean, George does a lot of things that are racy. Like he's trying to be racy. He's trying to excite you and titillate, be titillating. Um, if you ever see like if you ever like turn on like Fox News or something, or they have a lot of stories about, isn't it horrible that this 25-year-old woman in Texas like had sex with her high school student, like, oh, isn't that horrible? And you can always sit there and go, oh, it's so horrible. But at the same time, like you're still activating the same parts of your brain. Like you're still arousing people being like, ooh, you're bringing up the topic, like sex with underage people. Oh, isn't that, even though you get to be morally like, oh, what a horrible woman she was, you're still like in the back of your mind imagining this teacher having sex with her student and the naughtiness of it and all of that. So, I mean, George isn't innocent, like people kind of forget that like George plays all cutesy, like I'm George R. Martin, but his writing has always had an edge to it, a lot of edge. And, he struggles with it. I know that like making Tyrion into such an evil character made him really hard. It made it hard for him to write Tyrion and not as much fun as it used to be. Like he used to love writing Tyrion because in a Game of Thrones, a Clash of Kings, all the way up until the murder of his father and Shay, like Tyrion, he's okay. I mean, Simon Silvertongue, it was a pretty jerky thing to do. Stepping on Marillion's hand was a pretty jerky thing to do. But he's, for the most part, just this clever guy who's like quipping and you side with him. You side with him. And then you hit Dance and you're like, ugh. Now he's murdering people. He's murdering his ex-girlfriend and his dad, and he's raping people, and he's tricking Aegon into invading, and he's doing a lot of bad stuff. And but at the same time, that's the story. George is writing a story about horrible things happening to people and people having fucked up thoughts and ideas, like little, like there's a line that always sticks with me in A Feast for Crows where the High Septon, or one of the septas, says to Cersei, "You'll feel as pure as the morning of your wedding day," and she thinks, "I fucked Jamie the morning of my wedding day," and it's just like this weird fucked up idea, like, oh, like that's fucked up, like like it's the same. Like we've got twins fucking each other. We forget it because we've known these characters for so long, but like, you have to step back and be like, oh my gosh, this is a brother and a sister having sex, like, and they're twins. Like, this is horrific stuff. So like Dany being 14 compared to all the stuff around it, like a little boy getting thrown out of a tower, twins having sex, like all of this stuff, it's par for the course. It's horrible, titillating stuff, but this is the same as like CSI and Fox News and Criminal Minds and all of this stuff. It's you're trying to arouse people and keep them reading by putting something quite shocking in there. And he knows it's shocking. That's why it's like the last line of the chapter is her age. Who's after Theon, and will it be Asha? Ooh, well. You'll have to see. The next chapter will be out. It will be out in early January. I know people are thinking, oh well, Christmas miracle. Preston will have the next fanfic chapter at Christmas. It's not going to be on Christmas. I'm sorry, but it will be out in early January. I promise. It's going well, but yeah, we will see. We will see if it's Asha. I don't know. I don't know if it's Asha. It might be something else. You never know. You never, maybe it's a new point of view. Maybe it's a new point of view. Maybe it's an Eddard chapter. Maybe out of fucking nowhere, we've done an Eddard chapter. Out of fucking nowhere, he's back. He's fucking back. You know? Ladies, you know, he's back. Aerys Oakheart chapter, man. You thought he was dead. You thought he was beheaded, but he's back. Aerys Oakheart. That's the next one coming out. About the Sansa story, remember that the Royces were among the Lannisters, were suspicious and commanded they travel to King's Landing. Never happened. Yes. So back in A Game of Thrones, like the Royces are weirdly very pro Robb, want to join. They want the Vale to join Robb Stark's liberation or something, and Lysa is like, no, that's their war. Let's not worry about it. And so the Royces were the main ones on that. But yeah, the Royces were. And then in reverse, I think they don't. Do they not send anyone to bend the knee? Is that the idea? They don't send a. Do they not send a they don't send like a bending the knee kind of thing? Because they also like they don't like Royce because Robar Royce is part of the Rainbow Guard weirdly with Renly. I think that might be something about it. But yes, they are so it's hard to say about these like hidden motivations of House Royce. I mean, from what Littlefinger says of Bronze-Yon, he doesn't think that Bronze-Yon is much of a schemer. But I would say I would put a little more faith in Bronze-Yon. But you know, is he harboring some sort of secret plan to join the King in the North? Probably not at this point. I mean, everyone in the kingdom thinks that the Boltons have taken over the North and that Stannis is going to freeze up there. And I don't know if the Royces, you know, have any love for Stannis that we know about. You know, they showed a weird affection for Robb, and one of them joined Renly. So who knows what they're up to? But Tris Botley is a chump loser. I'm sorry that I'm so behind here where my Tris Botley stands. If the Lord of the Vale had declared impotence, it means the war with the Lannisters in any case. And what is the point of hiding Sansa? Trying to think like, okay, so say the Royces are totally up for having war with the Lannisters. So would they want to keep Sansa a secret and in hiding if they were just going to go to all-out war? I mean, one could make an argument that like Sansa is known for being a murderer, and that some people might not like her for being a king-slaying murderer, who poisoned Joffrey. I mean, for example, like Stannis did not trust Theon very much because Theon betrayed Robb. You know, like it wasn't about like my enemy is my friend kind of stuff. It's like once you've showing yourself to be untrustworthy, like, why would I follow you? You know? So like, if Sansa were out and about, you know, it might not make too much difference, but the fact that they're harboring some fugitive who's known for murder and simply don't care, would be quite a statement, you know. So I think there could be a point to hiding Sansa, even if you wanted to go to war with the Lannisters. You wouldn't want to be advertising the fact that you're just teamed up with some assassin who killed the last king. You know, it's just it's not a good look in this world of like knights in honor. Let's see here. Oh, Reagan Revolution means political realignment of evangelicals. Oh yeah, I guess you're okay. Yeah, that definitely happened where Reagan pulled in the evangelical vote. That was a time like, yeah, the whole conservatives used to be mainly about fiscal responsibility and small government and things like that, and then they pulled in the evangelical vote. And keep in mind that evangelicals, you know, a lot of them used to vote Democrat because they were Christians and they believed in charity and things like that, and they didn't care about fiscal responsibility. Then at some point there was this movement in the late 70s that really convinced the Christian community in America that abortion was against God's law. I mean, this is something that people didn't really think about too much before, you know, like, yeah, like abortion was illegal in a lot of places, but it wasn't necessarily linked to like, you're not a good, like, as a prime tenet of Christianity, you know? Keep in mind that, like, as an example, because some people probably like, they might have always been against it, but even if you're like against it, it was not like a huge important pillar. So for instance, Christianity had a period in America where being anti-alcohol was like very important to being Christian, because drinking alcohol was not a Christian thing to do. Or being anti-gambling was a huge part of being Christian, because gambling is not a very Christian thing to do, right? And so the Women's Christian Temperance Union and all of this eventually did get alcohol banned in America for a decade. But now if you talk to like Christians, yeah, there are dry counties still in like Alabama and Florida and stuff like that. But you don't think of like the anti-alcohol push as being a prime tenet of evangelical Christians, or gambling. Like gambling, the first lottery in America was in like 1967, and you know, and so like it's really relatively new that we became this gambling nation. And oh my God, like, if you like, what happened to fucking football, man? Fucking, oh my God. Like, how is it just like a bunch? It's just ads of people gambling, like all like the whole, and the stadium is just covered with gambling ads. What the fuck happened? You know, I understand that the laws changed, but like, anti-gambling was a huge pillar of Christianity. These were things that people went to the ballot box about. Like, you cannot have gambling, legalize gambling. Now it's gone. Now it's not important. But like, so it's like, what issues come to the forefront is largely a kind of social manipulative thing. So there was a movement in the 70s to bring abortion to the forefront of Christian thought and then pull them in as a voting bloc. And so that's, the Republicans went anti-abortion to bring in the Christian like bloc. So yeah, that definitely did happen. That makes sense. Reagan Revolution. Okay, I get it. Preston's son would have loved Club Penguin. What's Club Penguin? Because I need to find out about this. Oh, it's a game. Okay. So my son loves penguins. I don't know if I've talked about this much on stream, or you know, you guys probably hear my stories over and over again, but yes, he he loves penguins, and they're for instance, we were in DC, and we went into this chocolate shop to see if he wanted some chocolates, because we spoil our kids rotten, right? And he sees that they have chocolates in different shapes, and he sees some chocolate penguins, and he just starts crying. He just has a fit. He has a meltdown, and because he can't imagine someone like eating penguins. Like, that would just be the worst, most horrible thing in the world. So he like has a like a fit, and like goes down, and I like go to the people that work there. I'm like, hey, can you, like, I'm going to bring my son back in. Can you tell him that the chocolate penguins are only for show, and that those aren't for sale? Because you wouldn't want anyone to eat chocolate penguins. And they're like, yeah, we can do that. Okay. I was like, okay. So I go back out, and I like find my son. I'm like, no, those penguins aren't for sale. Those are for show. No one's eating those penguins, I promise. And he's like, what? And I like bring him in, and I bring him to the counter, and I'm like, yeah. So the chocolate, like, tell them about the chocolate penguins. And they're like, no, the chocolate penguins are for show. We don't sell. No. We don't sell the chocolate. No, those aren't for eating. Like, oh, and he's like, okay. And his like fucking meltdown, panic attack like ends, right? Things I do for. He saw me playing like Pokemon, and I was like fighting, and my opponent was an Empoleon, and he's like, you can't beat him. I was like, he like forces me to lose my match. Have I ever played Morrowind? Why is that familiar? Is Elder Scrolls 3? I have not. Keep in mind, like I said, I've got a very addictive personality, so I can't play video games without like becoming insanely addicted to them, and like not just beating the game, but being like completionist, like getting all the achievements, like that kind of bullshit, like what was the zombie game in the mall? Like, I fucking played that until I got every single achievement. I drove around the van underneath the fucking mall, like killing zombies to get like the million zombie like achievement, or the million kill achievement and shit like that. I can't. So, Preston, do you have your gallbladder? Yeah, I got my fucking gallbladder. Who are you saying I don't get? Is there a rumor going around I don't have a gallbladder? I got my gallbladder. The only thing I've had, got everything except for I had 2 wisdom teeth removed. I wasn't born with the ones on the top, but I have two wisdom. That's about it. So in the Game of Thrones show, Mira and all the Crannogmen just sat at Greywater Watch when the whole Northern Army and Bran went past King's Landing. Oh yeah. I mean, they played no role. They played no role at all in the show. I mean, I guess when Theon came, right, they still had them all being sickly, but I don't know if it was from Crannigs, or if they were just supposed to be from Boltons. But yes, they all watched all the armies go by. I mean, he watches all of them go by in the books too. Like, Howland Reed does jack and shit. Like, he does jack and shit. Like, Rob sends him letters, and he sends nobody. He sends Mira and Jojen, and that's it. I mean, a handful shoot some arrows at Victarion. That's about it. Like, the Krennic men, they're an untouched army. They've done nothing. So they're there. I mean, you could say that, they're, people have all these like fantasies about the Grand Northern conspiracy, that they're all like holding out because they all want Jon Snow on the crown, on the throne, and they're just waiting in their bog for that perfect moment in the story to be like, Jon Snow, you know. But it's just one of those things that like George didn't put enough time into. It's just ridiculous that no one would be like thinking about them, talking about them. Like when the Bolton army goes by, they'd be like, where are they? You know, when they don't show up to the wedding, shouldn't people be like, where are they? Like, shouldn't they be talked about all the time? They're just not. You know. So yeah, no, they just watched. They just fucking watched. They like to watch. Having sex with a woman? That's gay, bro. That's right. President Carmine, is Berserk with the Boys coming back? Greetings from a Brazilian fan. Yes, we're doing more Berserk with the Boys. There's just a lot of it's about aligning my time with Trey's time with Carmine's time. And past week, I've dropped the ball. I've been super busy, so he is. So, but we're definitely doing it. We're definitely doing it. Both Trey and Carmine love it. They think it. I think it's good stuff. What's your favorite new unspoken, unrealized people had to have been in the same place at the same time? Davos, Littlefinger, and King's Landing pre-conflict. This is one of those things like I think Tom Stoppard wrote a plague that about all these super like certain famous people were in Switzerland at the same time, and he wondered if they like ever hung out and stuff like that. Like certain people living in the same city, like do they at a certain period in history, like did they interact? Sometimes you just didn't know they were there. One of my favorite movies is Before Sunrise. Well, actually, Before Sunset is probably better. But there's this wonderful line from Before Sunset where, because he spent all of these years like thinking about this woman, and she spent all these years thinking about him, and they never met up. And they through talking, they find out that they were both living in New York City at the same time, like only a few blocks from each other. And he's like, "What? You were like living 3 blocks from me. Like, what the fuck?" You know? So, let's see. Like what characters were in the same place at the same time? Was Davos? Because Davos hadn't. Was Davos and Littlefinger and King's Landing at the same time? I'm trying to think about that, because in Robert's, like Davos is just like he's raised in King's Landing, but he leaves King's Landing to become a smuggler, and then he joins Stannis during the war, during Robert's rebellion, and then Littlefinger doesn't come to King's Landing until after the rebellion. He gets brought down by Jon Arryn and Lysa. So I don't know if Davos is given a lordship by then, or a landed knightship or whatever by then, I think. So he's in, the Rainwood. So I don't know if they're in the same place, but I'm trying to think of like characters that were in the same place. Like, we're still confused about whether Tyrion lived in King's Landing or he lived in Casterly Rock before a Game of Thrones, because we've been bringing this up. There's contradictory information on it, but definitely when he arrives in a Clash of Kings, he's like, when he was last in the city, this and this had happened, as if he wasn't part of court. But then there's other times where he's like, I have a place at court, like I know that person from court. Like, okay, which was it? Did he, how often was he there? Just all the time? Did he do 6 months in Casterly Rock, 6 months in King's Landing? We have no idea. People would have been in the same place at the same time. I mean, the big one that I think is pretty crazy is that Sam's grandfather is executed right before coming into Castle. Stannis comes into Castle Black, so he doesn't get to see his grandpa, and they all talk about like the guy getting executed, and he's like, "Oh, that sounds really horrible that they executed this guy." It's like, yeah, that was your grandpa, dude. Your grandpa got killed. I'm trying to think. It would be Citadel stuff, right? That's the most interesting stuff. That like is Oberyn and Qyburn at the Citadel at the same time. Um, Stuff like that. I'm trying to think if there's anybody with long backstories like that where you can kind of think about who they're in the same place. And I don't know. I'll have to come. I wish I had better answers than that. Besides, like, you know, Oberyn and Qyburn being at the Citadel at the same time, or King's Landing should be this place where people are hanging out, but I don't know. I don't know if I can figure out who would be there. That'd be super interesting. Hmm. Hmm. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Um. Just realized that when Stannis fled King's Landing after Jon Arryn died, seemingly knowing a war was coming, he not only left Robert, but also Renly in King's Landing. Was he hoping the Lannisters would kill Renly for him? Oh. that is an interesting thing. Like, it's beyond odd that Stannis would not inform Renly of everything and try to get Renly to come with him um, to Dragonstone. You would think that you would think that conversation would happen, and considering that Renly is close to the Night of Flowers, and everyone knows that Renly is close to the Night of Flowers, like you'd think that that would be a conversation that one would have, you know? Um, like I'm not very close with my brother, but if I were sharing a weekly meeting or whatever with him, and then I needed to leave town immediately, I would certainly fucking tell my brother and be like, let's go. Like, you need to come with me, especially if my brother wielded power. Um, yeah, that's an odd thing. That's a really odd thing not to share with Renly. And like why, like for him to not be, because Renly doesn't declare his kingship until much later. Like he could have said like, dude, we got an issue with the paternity stuff. There's war is coming. You got to come with me, dude. Or I got to show you this book, or whatever. Um, yeah, it's very odd that he didn't tell Renly. I don't know if there's a good explanation for that. I mean, he just doesn't like his brother that much, but they shared a fucking like weekly meeting together. It's He saw him all the fucking time. It's so weird. You're right that he should have just been like, Renly, what up? Like, I need to tell you something. I understand that we don't get along, but people are getting murdered because I think I discovered something about the paternity of the heir. Hmm. Hmm. Man. Yeah, I mean, this is another one of those things. This is like one of those Three's Company moments where you're like misunderstanding because people didn't fucking have a conversation that they should have fucking obviously had. Yeah, it's a Three's Company moment. Yeah, fucking Three's Company misunderstanding. He should have absolutely 100% like gone to Renly. The only thing I could possibly like come up with is that like he knew Renly was scheming with the Night of Flowers before, with Marjorie and all of that, and he he had already like caught wind of that and knew it, and like didn't trust his own brother. That's the only thing. But you'd think he would have fucking brought it up, especially when they're like throwing jabs at each other in the Catalan story. Man. Okay. Renly sniffing his own farts the whole time. That's true. Preston, the Davos chapter in Eastwatch is super easy. Like the Skagos chapter taking place before the prologue. The first chapter of the prologue we read, but temporarily the earliest drafts. I mean, we could do a Davos chapter and then, like I did with the Jaime chapters, where I just, I put it early, realizing that I needed an early chapter. But I keep pushing off like the first day of winter, I get it. Like, let's see. I mean, I get it. Let's see here. Let's bring up. So, I mean, okay, so here's what we got so far. So, our wonderful progress. So, first day of winter is obviously in the epilogue, but then we have the first day of winter prologue. We have the first day of winter in Elaine, and then we're kind of like we do a first day of winter in Daenerys, and we put Jaime. Jaime is before the first day of winter. I'm sorry, the first day of winter is in Elaine 2. So prologue or Elaine 2, Daenerys, that is first day of winter. I think the Envoy has a first day of winter. And then and that's about it. So the idea is you could do a Davos chapter, shove it in again, like it would probably get shoved in between like with Daenerys and Jaime, because we do. So there's we have this weird thing where we're going Elaine, Arianne, Hota, Elaine, Arianne, Hota, like in that order. And so we popped a couple Daenerys and the Jaime chapter there to space that out, because there's this heavy focus on these three. I mean, you could shove another Davos chapter in there and make Davos on Skagos like chapter 6, and then have a Davos much later at Eastwatch. But now we've got another fucking Davos chapter. It's like I mean, it makes the most sense. You're absolutely right that it makes the most sense, because it's really hard to have the Skagos story. Like, it's one thing to have stories in retrospect, like, but to have a long story is hard. You're constantly putting in the word had over and over again. So many hads. So it's maybe shove a Davos chapter in there at 5. It's just, it's like you keep wanting to progress the story, and it's like, oh, but we need to fucking have Davos and Skagos. Ah, fuck. Fucking Davos, man. Shove him in there. Oh, maybe. I don't know. It's either that or have a really brief, like, this is what happened on Skagos. That was it. Now I'm on Eastwatch. But I don't know. George. I mean, I guess Bran also, we just don't know the time period with Bran, so. You and your timeline. Favorite Tarantino movie and least favorite. Well, luckily there's not that many Tarantino movies to choose from. I want to make sure I'm not missing one. Okay, so let's go to the Tarantino's like new podcast is really interesting. He just fucking meanders. Like he doesn't have any like cohesive points. He's just all over the fucking place, but he's still fucking fascinating to listen to. Um, like I say, Quentin Tarantino's main strength is that he writes incredible dialogue, and even when you hear him talk, like you're he's very interesting to listen to. Which so I would say I have never seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I've never seen The Hateful Eight. I've never seen uh, Django Unchained. I have seen Inglorious Bastards, parts of Death Proof. I've seen Kill Bill. I've not seen Jackie Brown, Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs. So of these movies, which one, like of the ones I've seen, the one I enjoyed the most was Reservoir Dogs. I mean, which is funny because it's like the most amateurish one, but I think it's just a simple movie with really great dialogue that has a really incredible ending, and you really feel for the characters. There's a lot of emotional depth. You're not distracted by "isn't that cool" moments. I think my least favorite is actually Death. I don't know. Death Proof doesn't count. Death Proof, okay, it would be Death Proof, but like, I I think counting his actual full movies, of the ones I've seen, again, I've only seen Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, Kill Bill, and Inglourious Bastards. But my least favorite would probably be Inglourious Bastards. And even though I fucking love every scene that uh, the Nazi guy is in, Christopher, he's what's his face? He's super engaging. But Inglourious Bastards, the movie doesn't speak to me. I don't think the thesis of the movie is correct or compelling, and I don't think like any of the characters are relatable. So like Inglourious Bastards, the the message of the movie is that like World War II didn't kill the Nazis. Hollywood killed the Nazis by portraying them as buffoons. And that's what really killed Nazism was cinema. And that's the message, which is why like Hitler is burned up in the cinema in this like alternate universe, right? That's the statement being made. It's just false. The Nazis are still here, and Western cinema didn't fucking kill them and didn't fucking do anything. Like it just didn't fucking do anything. Okay, like it's an elevation of cinema that, like, look, we all watch movies. We all fucking love movies. Cinema didn't fucking get rid of the Nazis. It's a dumb idea. It's a dumb thesis. Also, none of the characters were that like interesting. Like everybody's just like rage. Like I want to kill. Okay, okay. That give me something more relatable than I'm so angry I want to kill. Like there's just nothing to it. So I'm not a fan of Inglourious Bastards. I also don't think that Brad Pitt really fit in the role and things like that. I don't know. There are really good parts of it, but I'm not a fan of Inglourious Bastards. Reservoir Dogs, I like connected with each of the characters. Like, Sean, like Sean Penn's brother, like fucking like Tim Roth, like Harvey Keitel, they just do fucking incredible performances. Each character is wonderful, but not in like a cartoonish way. Like Pulp Fiction's a great movie, but the people are cartoonish, and it's just a little too like, oh, I'm a badass, like So I'm a big fan of Reservoir Dogs. I think that was a great movie, and I don't know. People tell me Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is really fucking good. So, but I guess I don't like when things get too cartoonish because then it takes me out of it. I like relatable characters that make me feel something. And like Tim Roth's death at the end of Reservoir Dogs and Harvey Keitel's feelings and like that really like that still rings with me. I'm just like, oh man, what an incredible fucking scene. Like even something like Pulp Fiction, which most people's Pulp Fiction is probably their favorite, but with Pulp Fiction, I'm just like, well, there's some nice scenes in it. Like, I like John Travolta's like goodbye feelings to Uma Thurman and after their date, and but some of it, like I think Bruce Willis is pretty cardboard in that movie. Um, I mean, there's some funny stuff. There's stuff I laughed at. It's a hilarious movie. Like the Christopher Walken scene is fucking hilarious. But um, and Samuel L. Jackson is fucking hilarious. But like, it's funny, but it's not a movie that makes me feel, So let me see here. George messed up with the ravens, right? That chapter where Stannis sends every raven he has to different places seems at odds with the pigeon idea. Yes. Like, I think what they meant is that he sent every outgoing raven. Because it would be a pretty big fucking waste of time if he sent every raven. Like, he sends every raven, and then some of the ravens are like, okay, back to Dragonstone. like, okay. Well, that was quick. Why'd you release me? Back to Dragonstone. Right, like also like there's no point in sending every raven as well. Like if you have 10 King's Landing ravens, you don't send all 10 King's Landing ravens. Like, you could send 2 or 3, because if one gets lost, but like, what would be the point of sending every one? There's, you don't need to send like every King's Landing raven. Like that's stupid. Or every Storm's End raven. So I think they simply meant that like he sent it to every location he had. But yeah, it's a little a little silly. You released every raven? Yeah, a bunch of them immediately came back. Berserk with the Boys, episode 3. We'll try to have one. We'll try to have one this week. We'll try to. I see your son is a chicken hater. My son hates cats because he read in a book that cats killed penguins. He wants to kill every cat. But yes, Dead Rising was the zombie video game I played. Damon the Hero would be a great vid. Yeah, I need to get back to Damon the Hero. It's true. It's funny because now I have more like footage and stuff to go with season 2. But yeah, I need to get back to that too. I got too many projects on my plate right now. It's hard. It's hard. I also have I have a 90% done over analyzing House of the Dragon that's just been like sitting for 6 months. Like, any plans on watching Avatar: The Last Airbender? So, even though some people like have empty queues and they're looking for things, like, I've got shows that I need to watch that like are lining up. So like I need to finish Severance. I need to I guess Carmine mentioned Arcane. Like there are things where people are like, this is incredible, you need to see it. And I'm like, it's on the list. So I don't know. I never watched and I imagine you're talking about the live action. I never watched the cartoon, which everybody says is incredible. But maybe I should when my kid gets older. But how old is for Avatar Last Airbender. I mean, you don't, is Avatar, how kid friendly is it? And might disturb, I don't know. My kid's only 5, so so we'll see. I know everybody says it's great. I've never heard any bad things. Gallbladders are going the way of appendices. It's true. Going the way. He was burned for some really, really good wins. The grad dad was some Florent or something. It's like an Easter egg and hidden in the appendix. Yes, exactly. It's like something I didn't even realize until like, I don't know, 5 years ago or something. Like you're like, oh, right. Oh, I mean, even when you know it, it's like you don't connect it. Like, oh, right. Okay. Getting to the end here. It always takes me a while. Oh, I wasn't sure about Inglourious Bastards either, but it's very rewatchable. I mean, all of Quentin Tarantino is very rewatchable. They're very entertaining because he has just great dialogue and he's incredible pacing. I mean, he's a fantastic fucking filmmaker. Like let's like there's it's the same with like if you pick up a Spielberg movie, it's going to be fucking good because it's fucking Spielberg and he knows how to pace a fucking movie and do it and frame a shot, Like I was really surprised, like rewatching Jaws, where I'm just like, oh right, like nothing really happens in the movie. Like literally nothing happens in Jaws. Like it's a bunch of people arguing about closing a beach, and then they're on a boat, and then there's like 5 minutes at the fucking end with a shark, right? But it's so fucking well paced and it's so fucking well shot that you're just like watching Jaws being like, oh my God, this is so fucking good. Jackie Brown. People say Jackie Brown is super underrated. That some people say it's the best one actually. Seeing him on Rogan, I don't think Quentin Tarantino is so against fascism. He's a weirdo. Quentin Tarantino is, he's definitely out there. He's definitely really out there. The video with him putting on the black scent when he goes on BET is one of the weirdest fucking videos I've ever fucking seen. But as weird, it's like one of these things like is when somebody is like a horrible human being. I don't think Quentin Tarantino is necessarily a horrible human being, but even if he were, like, you can still sit there and be like, well, he's an incredible filmmaker. Like, like Meatloaf. Meatloaf was a fucking like, idiot. But do I think like his music was good? Yeah, of course. Is Mel Gibson a good actor? Yes. Is he a pretty good director? Yeah, he's actually a pretty good director too. Even if he is a fucking horrible person, like, what are you going to do? Is Louis C.K. a funny comic? Yeah. He's probably one of the greatest comics to ever live. And yeah, he kind of, and he sucks, but so what are you going to do? What are you going to do? It's hard to admit, look, when somebody actually has like real honest to God talent, I will grant it to them, Mel Gibson is a fucking really good actor and a pretty good director, and he's a horrible fucking human being. Elon Musk is a horrible human being and he's a fucking idiot. Like, I don't even think he got lucky with some investments. I don't like, you know, like I will tell you straight up when I think somebody like has, you know, like a redeeming quality and when somebody doesn't. Like, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. Oh. Was Richard Nixon the greatest president ever? Yeah, I don't know about that one. I mean, Watergate was kind of a big deal. Kind of a big deal. You know, that was, you know. Louis C.K. is my number one, but he shouldn't have pulled his dick out at work. Louis C.K. Yeah, no, I'd put him in the top, like, I'd put him in the top 5 comics, like, of all time. Like, you know, like, if I'm going to really go with, like, top comics of all time, for me, George Carlin is number one. George Carlin is number one. And then after that, you know, do I go with Richard Pryor or Lenny Bruce? Like, who, like, you know, like, that kind of thing. I mean, but Louis C.K. is really fucking good. Like, you know, but I might put Richard Pryor and Lenny Bruce and George Carlin like ahead of Louis C.K. Even though, you know, Louis C.K. he was really fucking good. You couldn't make a movie about Watergate today. Most boring scandal ever. Yeah, it's true. It's true. Elon Musk is going to be a better president than Nixon. How's Severance? I have not gotten further than where I was on the plane. I need to pirate it. I'm sorry. I haven't pirated it yet. Where's he going to rank Joan Rivers? It's funny because Louis C.K. would probably put Joan Rivers above himself. I don't think Joan Rivers was that great. I don't, like, she's fine, but I can think of, like, even if we're going female comedians, there are other female comedians that I think were better than Joan Rivers, you know, like, I mean, people forget that Ellen DeGeneres is a really fucking good stand-up, and Roseanne Barr, as horrible as she fucking is, like, as a human being, again, she was a really good fucking stand-up comedian. Really fucking good. So, like, it's hard, you know. Like, Joan Rivers gets that whole, like, well, she was doing it at a time when no other men were doing it kind of bump to her. But if you took her by herself, I don't know. The thing to get to the next level. So there's comedians that have perfect fucking timing, like Anthony Jeselnik. Okay, Anthony Jeselnik, perfect fucking timing. Maybe the best comic when it comes to actually delivering a joke in his timing. Like, has a joke, punchline, boom. Like, there may be nobody better. But the greatest comics, they have that philosophical level above them. And I'm not talking like the pseudo philosophy of, like, people are so woke today, like, I'm a philosopher. Like, no, I'm talking like next level, make the audience look at the inside of their guts, laugh, and come out of the experience a fully different person, wiser for the better, you know, like, which is why, like, you can put George Carlin, which is why I put George Carlin as number one, because he's like fucking formative, right? And, you know, Lenny Bruce and Richard Pryor also have that, like, revolutionary kind of people. And, you know, people try this kind of stuff. Like, you see Dave Chappelle trying with these, like, long story stand-up routines that have, like, deeper messages, but they're not that good. They're not on a George Carlin level of delivery, and actually not on a Louis C.K. level. There are jokes that Louis C.K. has told where I'm just like, wow, like, those are deep fucking cuts on the inside of your soul. Like, he's got some really, really fucking good stuff. And it's yeah, and yeah, he needs to it's too bad too bad he would masturbate in front of people, sexual harass them and cause trauma. Um I published a game today and utterly takes the piss out of Elmo Shucks, it's called Shelf Life. The yeah, do you do gaming publication, or do you program games? I mean, that's Shelf Life. I mean, it should be like yeah. I live near a lot of Cubans. I confirm they do in fact love fascists. Yes, the thing is when they yeah, it's like fear of communists make people into fascists. It's that kind of thing. Remember how people thought Whoopi was a comic? Whoopi was really good. Um, she was a really great comic. The I mean, even Billy Crystal was really good. I mean, Robin Williams is a really fucking great comic too. But um, oh, Smitty does. You don't like Jesselnick? Worst delivery of jokes. I hate him. I don't know. I think he's fucking. Um, oh, I think his podcast is horrible. I think Jessel. I mean, he's a stand-up comic. He needs to like deliver stuff with timing. I think his podcast is very boring. It's just him talking. I mean, but every comic has a podcast now. It's weird, but no, I think Norm Macdonald sucks. I don't understand like the Norm Macdonald obsession. Like he was a troll. He didn't have very good timing. His whole routine was being a troll. Um, but he was like not actually I'm going to burn everything down. He was actually a really hardcore conservative who liked to troll people before online conservative trolling was a thing. But like he was just kind of a dickhead. Like there's an episode of I don't know if you like, there was this conspiracy theory in the 90s because this one Democratic staffer was murdered in DC. Oh, a murder happens in DC. Random staffer is murdered in DC. And the right wing spread this rumor that he was killed by Hillary Clinton's like staff, or Hillary Clinton had him. It was a hit job from Hillary Clinton. And this rumor ended up like haunting this family because conservatives would try to track down this family and be like, what are you guys hiding? Why are you saying that your son was murdered by a random a random stick up and all of this stuff. This family's life, like not only was their son murdered, but then they spent like, it was like a good 2 decades of people harassing them, kind of like with Sandy Hook, with the conspiracy theory. Oh, why are these Sandy Hook parents lying and saying their kids died? The same thing. Norm Macdonald would go on talk shows and push that conspiracy theory. Like he would like several times be like, well, we can't vote for the Clintons. They're a bunch of murderers. And he'd like bring up this conspiracy theory. Like he was just a fuck. Like, and like when, like I saw like a clip of like somebody doing on Last Comic Standing where they like made fun of Christianity and he like got all bent out of shape. Like he was just a fucking conservative troll. That's all. And he didn't fucking have good timing. Like, I don't know. I think Norm Macdonald is outrageously overrated. Have you ever come up with the theory that baby boomers' brains are brain damaged from lead, explaining their crap behavior? I mean, I think is he I mean, wouldn't every previous generation have that brain damage though? Like wouldn't the greatest generation also have the brain damage from the lead? I don't know. Jeselnik's shtick is just a flatly stated joke. He literally has no delivery. I don't know. I mean, it's very dry, but I mean, he's the master of like expectation, reversal of the expectation kind of line, lines. There's really fucking, I don't know, like, I don't know. I mean, maybe he's a really good, maybe he's a really good joke writer. He used to deliver them very differently, actually. He used to deliver them with like smiles, and now he delivers them very flat and things like that. Jeselnik also has this really funny impression of Dane Cook, where he does like a Dane Cook impression, which is totally out of character for him. And then he just does it. He just goes in and does Dane Cook. You can find it on YouTube, but got to see George Carlin for my 30th birthday. Always been my number one. Man, you're lucky, man. Lucky to see George Carlin. And he was funny until the end. He was this crotchety. I mean, his routine changed. He started as like, hey, I'm George Carlin. And near the end, he's like, I'm George Carlin. But he was fucking funny until the end, man. We all have lead poisoning. I was talking about Comedy Central show. Oh, his Comedy Central show was not that great. No. His Comedy Central show was not great. His stand-up is really good. I mean, you can watch his latest Netflix special came out, and the first half is fucking gold. It gets weaker as it goes on. He puts all the good jokes up front. But yeah, his Comedy Central show was not that good. Because he's not a very good actor. Like, he's not. In many ways, I think. I actually think, even though people like get angry at Amy Schumer for a lot of stuff, like her Israel policy and stealing jokes, but like I think Amy Schumer's show was better in the sense that she was a better actress, than. But you'll also find me on the Comedy Central shows, because we essentially had Chappelle's show, we had Mind of Mencia, we had Inside Amy Schumer, and we had the Jeselnik Offensive, right? And I'm trying to think, or am I missing one of the Comedy Central, let's give a comic a show, kind of like give a comic a skit show kind of thing. And people talk up a Chappelle show so much, and it's like, Chappelle's show is funny and all, but you got to understand like how much filler was in that fucking show. Like, there was honestly like 2 skits, and then the show is over, because it's like intro, Chappelle's show, Chappelle's show, Chappelle's show, and then you get Chappelle on stage, and he's like introducing the sketch. Sometimes we want to, and then you get the skit, and the skit's funny, and then you go back to Chappelle on the stage again, and then you go to commercial, and then you go back to Chappelle on the stage, and you're like, oh my God, like, there's no content to this fucking show. Which is, when they gave him the 3rd season, no fucking wonder he flipped out, because he had such thin amount of material. Oh man. Vince Foster. There may have been, here's the thing, is there may have been more than one that I might be confusing. Because you're right that there was Vince Foster, the guy who committed suicide, who they then fucking like claimed Hillary Clinton murdered. And then there was another one. There was a staffer. Seth Rich. So you might be right that I might be. Yeah, you're right that timeline wise, I'm conflating. You're right that I'm conflating 2 conspiracy theory horrible things that they did that were exactly the same. But you're right. Like, Vince Foster committed suicide, and then they claimed the Clintons murdered him, and then there's a conspiracy theory around that, and then later Seth Rich was murdered, by a burglar, by a mugger, and they had a conspiracy theory that Hillary Clinton had him murdered too. So you're right that I conflated two different right-wing conspiracy Hillary Clinton as a murderer stories. Yeah, it was Vince Foster. Read about the game Bed Rotting. What is this? What? I survived 20 days in my bed? Oh my God. Bed Rotting is a horror game where you rot in bed and try to survive for 20 days. You have to eat and carry about your mental state and use a bucket as a toilet. What? This is the most fucked up thing. What? Oh my God. You gotta fucking see this. Oh my God. This is so ridiculous. Bed rotting. Bed rotting, you lie in bed trying to survive 20 days. You have to eat, carry about your mental state, and use a bucket as a toilet. You are a young girl who got into a car crash, and after being released from the hospital, she could not get up from the bed, not due to the injuries, but to her degrading mental state. But you need to survive through the game timeline and not die because of starvation or depression. In this game, you will get 20 survival days and several creepy monsters. What the fuck? Where have we come as a society? Oh my God. Oh my God. Jesselneck also crapped on Joe Rogan Bros. Should love him for that. It's true. He did recently do that. Jesselneck is, and it's not even a political thing. Like Jesselneck, like he's definitely a comedy snob. Cause like I say, he like worshipped Norm Macdonald, and Norm Macdonald was right wing, but like Jesselneck is very left wing, but like he worshipped Norm Macdonald, who was right wing. But he did like trash all of these Joe Rogan comedy bros because he thinks it's like a group of guys who aren't funny who go on the Joe Rogan podcast, and then people like watch them, and they're relying on knowing Joe Rogan to advance their careers without actually like paying attention to comedy. So yeah. Yeah. So it's true. It's funny. He did have a pretty funny, yeah, some jokes on that, but Key and Peele. But Key and Peele were never stand-ups, right? Key and Peele always improv comedians, but it's in the same kind of vein, right? Where it's why Key and Peele is, all right, I'll say this. Key and Peele is a better show than all of the ones I listed by far. Key and Peele was better show than fucking Chappelle's show. It's a better fucking show than Mind and Mencia by far. Mind and Mencia was horrible. Better show than Inside Amy Schumer, and better show than Justin Lake Offensive. Key and Peele it's just a fucking strong fucking comedy. Man, those guys are funny. Man. Just listening to them list football player names is just like, you know what? Daniel Tosh he's a really funny guy, and his show went on forever. Apparently Daniel Tosh in real life is like a wonderful human being. Like everyone that meets him is like, oh my God, he's like the nicest, most wonderful human being I've ever met. So I don't have anything bad to say about Daniel Tosh. I mean, he took a really cheaply made show where they just take internet they take YouTube videos and he makes jokes about it and turned it into a career where he was fucking hilarious. Um, so it's too bad. So I'm a right wing psychopath and I love Portlandia. Well, Portlandia is liberals making fun of liberals. So I mean, Portlandia has got some really niche fucking jokes where I'm like, whoa, that is fucking that have to do with like people my age who are into certain types of music in the 90s and um like there is the Amy Mann skit is one of the funniest fucking things I've ever seen in my goddamn life. Like, it like the Amy Mann skit by itself from Portlandia. Like, I mean, I do think like Fred Armisen is a fucking genius, but like the Amy Mann sketch is the most genius fucking thing I've ever seen in my life. So Amy Mann was just this like rock star from the 90s, but she was never that successful, right? And so in the show, like they hire her as their maid, and she's like cleaning the house because she needs to make a living. And Fred Armisen is like, "Wait, do you think is our maid Amy Mann?" And they're like, "Oh my god, it is! Oh my god, and I love her work. Oh my god, I love her albums. Oh my god!" And they go to her and they go up to her and they're like, "Oh, Amy, I just wanted to tell you, oh, your second album was like the most incredible thing. It just spoke to me so much. It like revolutionized my soul. Like, oh, it's so incredible. Also, when you do cleaning in the bathroom, can you make sure you be on the toilet? Like, I don't, like, oh, like, but it like speaks to so much like the level of worship that we had for these really niche musicians in the 90s who never earned any money and like where they are now, like living normal lives. That had you run into one, you'd be like, oh my God, you're so incredible. But you're now like, working as an insurance salesman or whatever. But oh man. Did you watch the new theory video that the others are white shadows shadow binded by green seers? Oh, I feel like it adds to your theories about the children being evil. Huh. I have not seen that. It's the first time I've heard that language being used, shadow binding, for others. I'll have to think about that. Because, like, I mean, it gets into the real question, like, what is shadow binding? Like, what is a shadow? My best guess on what a shadow is that a shadow is human subconscious or the human id or whatever that is being telepathically like taken out and like bound to do stuff. And I'm only basing this on the fact that like Forbidden Planet is George R. R. Martin's favorite sci-fi movie. It's his favorite movie, period. And that, the plot of like Stannis being asleep and having his brother killed is the exact plot of Forbidden Planet. Like the father is asleep and people are getting killed because his id is going around killing people. And that Stannis's id kills Renly. And he has no memory of it, or he dreams about it, just like the guy in Forbidden Planet. So I guess a shadow would be an id. But with the case of like the others, could they be id as well or something like that? I mean, they seem very physical. They seem like, crystal creatures. So I don't know. I mean, I do think that, you could have a situation where they're being telepathically linked or telepathically controlled in that sense. but we'll see. I mean, we won't see, but yeah. So I mean, the term shadow bind, like, is shadow bind just telepathic connection? Like, is the telepathic connection you have between you and your wolf like a shadow binding? I don't know, but anyway. All right, guys, this has been great. I have to head to bed. It is late for me, but thank you all for being with me. And I don't know. I think I'll be on vacation next week for the holidays, but should be back after that. But thank you all for staying with me. I'll talk to you guys later.